Hi, everybody. Last week we finished reading The One and Only Ivan. We hope you really enjoyed the book. This week we're going to continue to discuss the story. We'll be able to learn more about the real Ivan because Catherine Applegate, the author, based her story on a real gorilla who lived in Tacoma, Washington. And we will also be doing some writing about pages that we've read previously. So today's writing question is about unsung heroes. An unsung hero is someone who is committed to giving more than they take. Unsung heroes do many great things, but they are not looking for recognition. Although Ivan saves Ruby, Julia is an unsung hero in the book. Your job today is to describe why Julia is an unsung hero. There are several different examples in the story that would support the idea of why Julia is an unsung hero. When you write your answer, you need to cite evidence from the text. I'm going to reread with you a few different sections of the book that might be helpful for you as you try to write your answer. As I read these pages, you should have your book open and you should read along with me. The first page is pages 16 and 17. So turn to 16 and 17. Read with me and be thinking of evidence that supports the idea that Julia is an unsung hero. Julia is 10 years old. She has hair like black glass and a wide half-moon smile. She and I have a lot in common. We are both great apes, and we are both artists. It was Julia who gave me my first crayon, a stubby blue one, slipped through the broken spot in my glass along with a folded piece of paper. I knew what to do with it. I had watched Julia draw. When I dragged the crayon across the paper, it left a trail in its wake like a slithering blue snake. Julia's drawings are wild with color and movement. She draws things that aren't real, clouds that smile and cars that swim. She draws until her crayons break and her paper rips. Her pictures are like pieces of a dream. I can't draw dreamy pictures. I never remember my dreams, although I sometimes awaken with my fists clenched and my heart hammering. My drawings seem pale and timid next to Julia's. She draws the ideas in her head. I draw the things in my cage. Simple items that fill my days. An apple core, a banana peel, a candy wrapper. I often eat my subjects before I draw them. But even though I draw the same things over and over again, I never get bored with my art. When I'm drawing, that's all I think about. I don't think about where I am, about yesterday, or tomorrow. I just move my crayons across the paper. I'm going to stop there, and I want you to think if there's any examples in there where Julia is an unsung hero who does something not for recognition. Our next page is pages 46 and 48. So please turn to pages 46 through 48. Find those pages, and I will read along. Have your eyes on the text. I love Julia's pictures of Bob. She draws him flying across the page, a blur of feet and fur. She draws him motionless, peeking out from behind a trash can or the soft hill of my belly. Sometimes in her drawings, Julia gives Bob wings or a lion's mane. Once she gave him a tortoise shell. But the best thing she ever gave Bob wasn't a drawing. Julia gave Bob his name. For a long time, no one knew what to call Bob. Now and then, a mall worker would try to approach him with a tidbit. Here, doggy, they'd call, holding out a French fry. Come on, Pooch, they'd say. How about a little piece of sandwich? But he would always vanish into the shadows before anyone could get too close. One afternoon, Julia decided to draw the little dog curled up in a corner of my domain. First, She watched him for a long time, chewing on her thumbnail. I could tell she was looking at him the way an artist looks at the world when she's trying to understand it. Finally, she grabbed her pencil and set to work. When she was finished, she held up the page. There he was, the tiny, big-eared dog. He was smart and cunning, but his gaze was wistful. Under the picture were 3 bold, confident marks circled in black. I was pretty certain it was a word, even though I couldn't read it. Julia's father peered over her shoulder. "That's him, exactly," he said, nodding. He pointed to the circled marks. "I didn't realize his name was Bob," he said. "Me either," said Julia. She smiled. "I had to draw him first." Bob will not let humans touch him. He says their scent upsets his digestion. But every now and then, I see him sitting at Julia's feet, her fingers moving gently, just behind his right ear. And that's the end of that section, which may have some evidence of Julia being an unsung hero. Now we're going to turn to page 159. So take a few seconds to find that. And once again, you need to read along with your eyes while I read out loud. I'm going to start at the bottom of 158. "Oh, hey, I almost forgot." Julia runs to her backpack. She pulls out 3 plastic jars, one yellow, one blue, one red. She opens the jar, and an odd, not food smell hits my nose. Julia pushes the jars one by one through the opening. Then she slides the paper through. "These are called finger paints," she says. "My aunt gave them to me, but really, I'm too old for finger painting." I stick a finger in the jar. The paint is thick like mud. It's cool and smooth, like bananas underfoot. I pop my finger into my mouth. It's not exactly ripe mango, but it's not bad. Julia laughs. "You don't eat it, you paint with it." She grabs a piece of paper and presses her fingers on it. "See? Like this." I place my finger on the piece of paper. I lift it, and a red mark is there. Okay? So what's the evidence that Julia is somebody who does something without looking for recognition? An unsung hero. Lastly, we're going to turn to page 209. This one's kind of a long section of the text. So please turn to page 209 and be ready to follow along. After a long while, I grow quiet. I sit. It's hard work being angry. Julia looks at me with wide, disbelieving eyes. I'm panting. I'm a little out of shape. "What the heck was that?" George demands. "Something's really wrong," Julia says. "I've never seen Ivan act this way." "He seems to be calming down, thank goodness," George said. Julia shakes her head. "He's still upset, Dad. Look at his eyes." My pictures are scattered all over the floor, like huge autumn leaves. "What a mess," George says, sighing. "Wish I hadn't bothered sweeping tonight." "Do you think Ivan's okay?" Julia asks. "Probably just a temper tantrum," George says. He reaches under a chair to retrieve a brown and red picture. "Can't say I blame the guy, stuck in that tiny cage all these years." Julia starts to answer, but then she freezes. She cocks her head. She stares at her feet, where my pictures lie in disarray. "Dad," she whispered, "come see this." "I'm sure he's another Rembrandt," George says. "Let's pick these up and get going, Jules. I'm exhausted." "Dad," she says again, "seriously, look at this." George follows her gaze. "I see blobs." Many, many blobs, along with the occasional swirl. Please, can we go home now? That's an H, Dad. Julia kneels down, straightening one picture, then another. That's an H. And here, she grabs more pictures. Put this one here. And I don't know, maybe that one. You have an E. George rubs his eyes. I hold my breath. Julia is running now. She picks up one picture, sets down another. It's like a puzzle, Dad. This is something. It's a word, maybe words, and a picture of something, a giant picture. Jules, George says, this is crazy. But he's looking at the floor too, wandering from picture to picture and scratching his head. H, Julia says, E-O. Ho? Julia chews her lip. H-E-O. And that one looks a lot like an I. H-E-O-I. George writes in the air with his finger. I-E-O-H. Not the letter, an actual I, and that's a foot, or maybe a tree, and a trunk. Dad, I think that's a trunk. Julia runs to my window. Ivan, she whispers, what did you make? I stare back. I cross my arms. This is taking much longer than I thought it would. Humans. Sometimes they make chimps look smart. Julie and George finally take the picture to the ring, where there's room to see them all. An hour passes as they try to assemble my puzzle. Ruby's awake now, and she and Bob and I watch. Ivan, Ruby says, is that a picture of me? Yes, I say proudly. Where am I supposed to be? That's a zoo, Ruby. See the walls and the grass and the people looking at you? Ruby squints. Who are all those other elephants? You haven't met them yet, I say. It's a very nice zoo, Ruby says with an approving nod. Bob nudges me with his cold nose. It is, indeed. In the ring, Julia pumps her fist in the air. Yes, she cries. I told you, Dad. There it is. H-O-M-E. Home. George gazes at the letter. He spins around to look at me. Maybe it's just a coincidence, Jules. You know, a once-in-a-trillion kind of thing. Like the old saying about the chimp and the typewriter. Give him long enough and he'll write a novel. I make a grumbling noise, as if a chimp could write a letter, let alone a book. Then how do you explain the rest of it? Julia demands. The picture of Ruby in the zoo? How do you know it's a zoo? George asks. See the circle on the gate? That's a red giraffe in it. George squints and tilts his head. Are you sure that's a giraffe? I was thinking more along the lines of a deformed cat. It's the logo for the zoo, Dad. It's on all their signs. Explain that. George gives her a helpless smile. I can't begin to. I'm just saying there has to be a logical explanation. Look at how big this is. Julia puts the last piece of Ruby's right ear in place. It's huge. It is definitely large, George agrees. Julia watches me. She chews on her thumbnail. I see the question in her eyes. She turns to the paintings and stares at them, truly looking at them. A slow smile dawns on Julia's face. Dad, she says, I have an idea. A big idea. Julia races around the edge of my painting, her arms spread wide. Billboard big. I'm not following you. I think this is meant to be on a billboard. That's what Ivan wants. George crosses his arms over his chest. What Ivan wants, he repeats slowly. And you know this because you two have been chatting? Because I'm an artist and he's an artist. Uh-huh, says George. Julia clasps her hands together. Come on, Dad, I'm begging you. George shakes his head. No, I'm not doing that. No billboard, no way. I'll get the ladder, Julia says. You get the glue. I know it's dark out, but the billboard's lit. Mac will fire me, Jules. Jules considers. But think of the publicity, Dad. Everybody would know about Ruby. You want me to put up a sign that shows Ruby in a zoo with the words home on it in giant letters? George gestures towards my pictures. A sign, incidentally, that just happens to have been made by a gorilla? Exactly. And you want me to do this without Mac's permission? George asks. Exactly. No, George says. No way. Julia goes to the edge of the ring, careful not to step on any of my paintings. She picks up Mac's claw stick, and she walks back and hands it to her father. George runs a finger along the blade. She's just a baby, Dad. Don't you want to help her? But how would it help, Jules? Even if lots of people see Ivan's sign, it doesn't mean anything's going to change. I'm not exactly sure yet. Julia shakes her head. Maybe people will see the sign, and they'll know this isn't where Ruby belongs. Maybe they'll want to help too. George sighs. He looks at Ruby. She waves her trunk. It's a matter of principle, Dad. Principal. L-E, George corrects. Dad, Julia said softly, what if Ruby ends up like Stella? George looks at me, at Ruby, at Julia. He drops the claw stick. The ladder, he says quietly, is in the storage locker. So, boys and girls, those are some pages that have evidence that would help you to answer the first question for today's assignment. The second question for today's assignment is to reread pages 68, 69, and 70. So you can turn to page 68, 69, and 70. And the question is about what happens after Ruby arrives at the zoo. This is when Stella is still alive and Ruby arrives at the zoo. Here's the question. Following Ruby's arrival, Ivan thinks, I am glad for Stella. But when I glance at her, I see she is not glad at all. Your job today is to write answers to these questions. Why might Stella be happy to have baby Ruby there? And why might it also make her sad? You may already be able to answer that question from your thinking, but we can reread pages 68, 69, and 70, and that will help with some evidence from the text. This is page 68. The new neighbor arrives after the 4:00 show. When the truck comes lumbering toward the parking lot, Bob scampers over to inform us. Bob always knows what's happening. He's a useful friend to have, especially when you can't leave your domain. With a groan, Mac lifts the sliding metal door near the food court, the place where deliveries are made. A big white truck is backing up to the door, belching smoke. When the driver opens the truck, I know that Stella is right. A baby elephant is inside. I see her trunk poking out from the blackness. I'm glad for Stella. But when I glance at her, I see she is not glad at all. Stand back, everyone, Mac yells. We've got a new arrival. This is Ruby, folks. 600 pounds of fun to save our sorry butts. This gal is going to sell us some tickets. Mac and the two men climb down into the black cave of the truck. We hear noise, scuffling, a word Mac uses when he's angry. Ruby makes a noise too, like one of the little trumpets they sell at the gift store. Move, Mac says. But still, there is no Ruby. Move, he says again. We haven't got all day. Inside her domain, Stella paces as much as she's able. 2 steps one way, 2 steps the other. She slaps her trunk against the rusty metal bars. She grumbles. Stella, I ask, did you hear the baby? Stella mutters something under her breath, a word she uses when she's angry. Relax, Stella, I say. It will be okay. Ivan, Stella says, it will never be okay. And I know enough to stop talking. So, boys and girls, your job is to write two responses to those questions, to question 1 and question 2. And when you write your answer, you're going to use evidence from the text that helps you to put your answer together. Please remember to write in complete sentences, and we'll connect about it later.